Hello, everybody. Today, together, we're going to see what new features and updates we will have in the upcoming Angular 18 release, which is coming in some days or even hours. I hope the Angular team will not press the button right now, right? So first things first, some information about me. I live in Greece, in the second biggest island, which is called Evia. It is very near in the capital, about 1 hour by car. And I work as a web development team lead at a company called PlexEarth, where we develop web applications using Angular for the front end and Nest.js in the back end. Since 2020, I'm part of the Google Developer Experts program for the Angular framework, and also I'm the author of Learning Angular and Angular Projects books. Learning Angular is a book that is destined for beginners to the Angular framework that want to learn the basics and get started with Angular development. On the contrary, Angular Projects is a book which is a better fit for developers that have already some basic knowledge with Angular and want to dive deeper. For example, each chapter is a different project with Angular and another technology. For example, we have a chapter with Angular and NX, like Pupo said. And we have Angular with Electron, Angular with Ionic, and so on. The new edition of my Learning Angular book, the 5th edition, is now available to pre-order from the Amazon website. It is fully updated to Angular 18, even if Angular 18 is not released yet. Okay, I did some magic, right? Spoiler, yeah. And you can also scan the QR code on the slide or navigate to the link on the bottom to go to the Amazon link. There's also a flyer in front of you for the people that is here if you want to check it out. If you want to connect with me via social media, you can check my Google developer profile at g.dev/Aristeidis, where you will find all the social links in there. This isn't the first time that I give a talk about what's new in Angular X. Actually, my first time was in Angular Athens meetup, when I did a talk about what's new in Angular 6. Hopefully, we don't have any developers in the audience that want to migrate from Angular 6 to Angular 18 directly, right? It will be challenging, though, if someone wants to do it. So the agenda of today's talk, we're going to see some updates on the following Angular areas. We will see what's new in tooling with Angular CLI and developer experience. What's coming up with the Deferrable Views API. What new APIs we will have in the Angular router. How content projection will be improved with Angular 18. Also, some new APIs in the Angular forms. And finally, we have some picks for the hydration part, which is very important in the latest versions of Angular, and the change and some improvements in the change detection mechanism of the framework. So let's get started with tooling and developer experience. We will see some updates on the Angular CLI and on the package dependencies that Angular needs in order to run. As with all major versions of the Angular framework, the TypeScript versions and the Node.js versions have been updated. In Angular 18, we will have TypeScript 5.4 and Node.js version 22. These will be the requirements. In Angular 18, we have also a new command, which is called ngdev. And this command is an alias for the ngserve command. And when we mean an alias, if you run your terminal and run ngdev, it will execute the ngserve command under the hood without any additional magic or something else. It's just an alias. The Angular team decided to create this alias so that the framework is aligned with other frameworks and tools that have also the same command for developing web applications. In Angular 18, we have also a new build system, which is under the Angular/build npm package. And this new package contains a small subset of the Angular CLI builders that are already beneath the Angular dev kit build-Angular npm package, which contains all the Angular CLI builders that we know so far. The real difference is that this new build system does not require Webpack under the hood. It works with ESBuild and Vite, which is the new build system and the bundling. Hopefully, we will see a migration from the Angular CLI team that will migrate your Angular.json file to the new build system so that you can develop your Angular 18 applications using the Angular build system. For the time being, the Karma runner requires the Webpack builder still. So if your unit tests are written with Karma and Jasmine, unfortunately, for the time being, you need to stick with the current Webpack builder. But the Angular CLI in version 18 will be smart enough to understand what you are doing. So if you are running your unit tests, it will use the Webpack-based builders under the hood. If you are developing your web application in development mode, then it will use the new Angular build system. So another improvement in the Angular CLI is concerned with project structure and with folder naming. The assets directory that we all know so far, it was traditionally used to keep static files. For example, icons, images, translation files, font files. And this directory has been renamed to public in Angular v18. So when you create a new Angular CLI 18 application, you will not get the old assets directory, but you will get the public one. And for the migrations also, I think they will have put a migration that changes the name. So if in your applications you have a custom tool, custom third-party tool, or a bash script that you use, which uses this assets directory, you will need to update it to the new naming after you upgrade to Angular 18. Another great news to the Angular 18 is that the Deferrable views API will become eventually stable. Wow. And all the APIs and methods from the Deferrable views will be stable, and we as developers will be very confident to use it. So just a refresher, Deferrable views API allows developers, Angular developers, to lazy load a component so that it improves the application performance and the core web vitals metrics inside our application. The Deferrable views APIs consist of some basic building blocks, those blocks that we already have in the new control flow syntax. For the history, the control flow syntax was used to be able to reach the Deferrable views implementation. The most basic building block is the defer block. The defer block indicates the content that will be lazy loaded when a certain condition occurs. For example, in this case, the app featured component will be loaded when it reaches the browser viewport. Of course, inside the defer block, we can pass additional parameters if we want. You can check out in the new Angular documentation website, Angular.dev, what other parameters you can pass. Additional to the defer block, we have also some other helper blocks, sub-blocks. For example, we have the placeholder block, which indicates what will be displayed on the screen before the deferred content starts loading. So as we see in the example, it will display an image HTML element and will also adjust the timing, and it will display it minimum 1 second. The placeholder block can accept other optional parameters. It's not only the minimum that we see here, we have also other parameters that you can check out in the official documentation website. A similar block to the placeholder is the loading block, which is used to display on the screen something while the deferred content is loading. For example, it is used to display a spinner or a loading indicator or a progress bar or some other message. And finally, we also have the error block, which is used when we want to display an error message or something or another content when the deferred content fails to load. So now let's see some improvements in the Angular router API, and we will start with some updates on resolvers and guards. The code sample that you are going to see has been written with guards, but you can apply the same exactly technique to resolvers. So here we have a very simple guard, an authentication guard, which is of type canActivateFN. It's a canActivate guard. And inside the body of the guard, we inject two services. The first one is an authentication service, which is a custom service, and the second one is the well-known router service. So our guard, the business logic of the guard, checks the isLoggedIn property of the authentication service, and if it is true, it returns true. And the guard will allow the Angular application to continue the navigation. If it is false, then we call the navigate method from the router service. The navigate method actually tells Angular to perform a redirect to the path that is passed as a parameter to the navigate method. So in this case, we redirect to the root path of our application. An alternative solution to the navigate method is the parseURL method. The parseURL method actually returns a URL tree. And when a guard returns a URL tree, then it actually tells Angular to perform a redirection. And it can also pass the same parameters as before. One major disadvantage with this approach is that we cannot pass navigation extras while we do the actual navigation. And navigation extras is an options object where we can pass additional parameters that we want to be applied during the navigation. For example, we can set query parameters, we can set the skip location change property or the replace URL property. Thankfully, in Angular 18, we have a new API, which is called RedirectCommand. The RedirectCommand will allow us to use navigation extras inside the resolvers and guards. And we can import the RedirectCommand from the Angular router npm package. So the previous code will transform to this one. We still have the parseURL method to just create the URL tree, and we keep its value into a local variable. So the guard now doesn't return a URL tree. Instead, it returns an instance of a RedirectCommand. And in the constructor of the RedirectCommand that we use, we pass two parameters. The first is the URL tree that we created before, and the second one is the actual navigation extras object that we want to pass. Another update in the Angular router API is that we can modify some parts of the application, of the route configuration of our application. Suppose that we have this routing configuration in our application. In this configuration, we have two route definition objects. The first one points to the products path, which activates a product list component. The second one points to an empty string path, which is the default path, as we know in Angular. And it doesn't activate any component, but instead it uses the redirect to property to redirect to the products path. So until now, we knew that the redirect to property accepts only a string. In Angular 18, the redirect to property will be able also to accept a function of type redirect function. And this redirect function is an ordinary arrow function that returns a subset of the activated route snapshot object, which is active at this point. So we can use this feature and add additional custom logic before making the actual redirection. So the previous code could be converted to that one, to this one. The redirect to property now, it's just an arrow function. The route object that we pass in the arrow function is an activated route snapshot object. We can do anything we want, custom logic, but at the end, we need to return the path where we want to redirect to. For example, in this case, we return the products path. So let's see some things about content projection and how we can create default content inside content projection slots. Okay, before Angular 18, suppose that we have two Angular components, right? A product card component and an app component. The product card component contains a div element with an ng content selector so that someone can use it, can consume it, and project some content. The app component now uses the product card component, but it doesn't project any content at all for some reason. So if we run this application, we will get an empty screen, as you see on the right-hand side of the screen. In Angular 18, we can add some default content that will be displayed if nothing is passed in the content, nothing is passed to be projected in the content. So with Angular 18, we can add inside the ng content selector any HTML content that we want, and this content will be displayed if the consumer of the component doesn't project any content. So in this example, we have added the text no product, and if the app component doesn't project any content, it will display the no product text at the application output. Of course, this feature can become more obvious how helpful it is if we think about select slots in content projection. For example, our product card component could have 3 ng content slots. The first one would be the header, for example, to display some additional information about the product. The main one would be the default one, the body, and the last one would be a footer, where we will have some actions that we could do in the product. So for these select slots, we could have additional fallback content. For example, we could display product title or product footer. Now, about Angular Forms, we have a new mechanism which is called Unified Control State Change Events mechanism that simplifies a lot the observables inside Angular Forms. Before Angular 18, if we wanted to get notified about when a status or a value of a form control or a form group changes, we need to subscribe to the appropriate observables. The status changes observable and the value changes observable, and perform our custom logic. So in Angular v18, these two observables have been combined to one observable, which is called the events observable. It is similar to the router events, if someone knows about that. So the events observable, when we subscribe to it, either on the level of the form control or the form group, we can get an object, the EVT object, and this object can be of type either status change event or value change event. So we can add custom logic inside the arrow function and differentiate between the instances of the EVT object. Of course, in this case, we also benefit from TypeScript, and when we call when we access the AVT object, TypeScript knows which instance is the AVT object, and it allows us to access either the status property or the value property according to the type of the AVT. But there isn't. We don't have only status change event and value change event supported in this mechanism. We also have new events. For example, we have the unified control state change mechanism supports the pristine change event, which is triggered when the pristine status of a form control over a form group changes. We have the touch change event, which is concerned with the touch status. And the latest addition is 2 events about forms. The form submitted event, which triggers when a form is submitted, and the form reset event, which is the event when the form is reset. So now about the hydration part, which is very important in Angular lately. In the hydration, we will see an update about as far as internationalization is concerned. In Angular 18, internationalization will be supported in hydration. So if you have an application that and you have implemented internationalization and you have some ITN blocks, with Angular 18, you will be able to hydrate those blocks when you use Angular SSR. You can try this feature using the with ITN support method from the Angular platform browser method, platform browser package, I'm sorry, and you pass the with ITN support method as a parameter to the provide client hydration method inside your application configuration file. Please be aware that this is currently in developer preview. So I would suggest to go and try it out if you have such an application and let us what you think. And finally, in the change detection area, we will see major improvements. So I would like to have a look, if it is visible for you, especially in the back. And I would like to have a look on this code and tell me if you see something weird or strange with the code. As you see, I will explain you what is the code about. The code is part of a component that displays product details. It is actually an excerpt from my new book. And it displays the product title, it displays the price of the product, and it uses a currency pipe, and it also has a button to add the product to a shopping cart. No, it's not the product price, but you were close. The actual problem is that if someone clicks the button, the add to cart button, it will call the add to cart method because it is bind to the click event. But because this event will bubble up, it will also call the add to cart method once more. So is it bad that we will call the add to cart method twice? What do you think? No? Anyone with yes, except me? Yes, okay. Yes, actually there will be a problem because change detection will also be triggered twice at the same time for the same method. And this can cause many problems. Of course, it depends also on the implementation of the method, but it is not very good for a performance scope of the application. So in Angular 18, we can disable this feature, this behavior, sorry, by using the ProvideChangeDetection method from the Angular core npm package and setting the event coalescing property to true. This property, when set to true, it will prevent the bubble up of the event, and it will not call the same method more than once. For a new Angular CLI 18 applications, you get this feature for free because when you create the application, it will be there for you. And the final change in the final updating the change detection mechanism is the famous zoneless applications, like we saw in the first talk from Christoph. Now, traditionally, Angular uses Zone.JS, a library, to trigger change detection inside the framework. And the usage of this library has some disadvantages. The first disadvantage is that it is almost 30 kilobytes. So when you ship the application, when you publish the application, it needs to download 30 kilobytes of JavaScript to the client. And this 30 kilobytes is just to monkey patch some browser events. And the Angular will run change detection according to this monkey patching. The problem is that it runs the change detection more, it might, because it's not very sure, it might run change detection more often than needed. So this will cause some performance problems in the application. And the final disadvantage is that it is very hard to debug. I think you remember some error log messages back in Angular 16, where the console displayed some errors from Zone.js along with your message from your application, and it wasn't very easy to differentiate what really happened in your application code. Thankfully, the Angular team has changed that, and their messages have become more simple. But again, Zone.js is hard to debug by itself. So what we can do, we can use a new method, which is called ProvideExperimental zoneless change detection method from the Angular core npm package, and we can add it to the provider's array of our application configuration. And what this method does is it does not include Zone.js inside our application. So very briefly, how zoneless applications work. They don't use Zone.js to trigger change detection. Instead, they use standard Angular APIs, which are stable and controllable from the framework, like mark4check from the change detector ref, or some signals API that interact with the template. You can use experimental zoneless support inside your unit tests if you use the testbed class, so that you can match your unit tests with the real production environment. And finally, zoneless does not require using signals. Initially, the Angular team designed signals so that it can reach a zoneless environment in Angular applications at some point. But in the meantime, they show that they can achieve that without using signals. So you can create zoneless applications experimentally without having signals. But it is recommended to use signals in Angular applications. To recap, what are some key takeaways from this talk? First of all, Angular 18 will bring some improved ergonomics as far as Angular CLI is concerned, and our development packages. We will see some improved performance optimizations by making the deferred views API stable, or with the zoneless applications. It will have also some simpler APIs, as we saw in the Angular forms, in the Angular router, and in the content projection. And last but not least, when Angular 18 is released in a couple of days, I would suggest you to run ng-update and update your Angular applications to Angular 18. And that's all for me. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Aris. So let's start with the Q&A.
Okay, the question is if we can achieve backwards compatibility when using event coalescing with ProvideZoneChangeDetection detection. The answer is yes, you can do it by setting the event coalescing property to false. You will have the same behavior as before. As far as I know, you can't have a hybrid operation of this event coalescing property. Yeah. As far as I know, it is not doable right now, but in the future, maybe who knows, they will release something that ensures that. But they have been based on some metrics and other Angular applications, and they have released this feature. You're welcome.
Are there any questions?
The question was if we can choose another name for the public directory in Angular 18. No, it is called public. There isn't such a feature right now. You don't have this capability, but I suggest that, if I'm not mistaken, you can change the assets name already in the Angular.json file. I'm not entirely sure. But if you have this capability in the Angular.json file, I guess you can adjust it from there. But the default one, you can't change the default one when you create a new Angular shell application. The question was if the state property, the navigation extras, still works with the redirect command. Yes, if it is in the navigation extras, it still works, no problem. So the question was if the redirect function in the redirect to property can be asynchronous or not. I checked the Angular documentation before, and I saw an example with synchronous logic. So I'm not sure about that if it can be, but in the Angular.dev, in the new Angular.dev, which will become stable also with Angular 18, it will have all the information about this redirect to function. And the parameter that is inside, it's just a small subset of the activated route snapshot at this point of time. You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so we don't have more on site. There are some on the online, like, give me a second. How does change detection will work without the zone and without the signals? Because you said it's this new zoneless will work without the signals as well. Probably that's the question I get.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So how change detection will work without the zone and signals? That's the question.
The Angular team will make sure that your application works even if you don't use Zone.js and signals. Mm-hmm. Signals is not required for zoneless applications. It's not obligatory to use signals. So if you use, for example, observables, it will still work as it is now.
Mm-hmm. And also, same person is asking whether it will be developer preview or stable, as in the version 18, this feature.
The experimental, the zoneless.
Yeah.
Yeah. As the name implies, it will be experimental in Angular 18. Mm-hmm. And it will follow the same policy as they do with other features. It will go, if they see that it is acceptable, they will go through a developer preview, and then they will follow the policy and will become stable, hopefully next year, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And the last one, whether the Forms API changes introduce some breaking changes to the new version.
No, the old observables will still work, but I think it makes more sense to use the new events observable if you subscribe to many, if your custom logic it's very complicated inside these subscriptions. So I would suggest to switch to the new events API because they will also add some new change events.
Okay, and that was the last one. So thank you one more time.
Thank you.